The night was cold, silent, and endless. When Sergeant Hamid opened his eyes, all he could see was a faint light flickering from a lantern hanging in the corner of a mud-walled room. His hands were tied. His uniform was torn. His mouth was dry. But what hurt most was the silence, the kind that follows after gunfire, after loss, after capture. He tried to move, but a sharp pain in his ribs reminded him of the beating he had taken hours earlier. His last memory before everything went dark was his friend Rashid shouting his name as the Taliban surrounded their position in the mountains of Khost. Then the sound of boots, then nothing. Now, in this small cell that smelled of dust, smoke, and fear, Hamid realized he was alive but not free. Two men entered the room. One carried an old AK-47. The other wore a black turban, his face hidden except for sharp eyes that seemed to read everything. "You are soldier?" the man asked in broken English. Hamid stayed silent. "You fight with Americans?" The man pressed again. Hamid stared back. Silence was the only power he had left. The man sighed, then spoke in Pashto, ordering the guards to take him outside. The cold hit his skin like knives. The sky above was filled with stars, beautiful, uncaring witnesses to his captivity. They dragged him to a courtyard where other prisoners sat in silence. Some Afghan soldiers, some civilians. A few too weak to lift their heads. Over the next days, time lost meaning. They fed him once a day, bread as hard as stone, water that tasted like rust. The guards rarely spoke except when they came to question him. "Who do you work for? How many Americans are in your base? What routes do your patrols take?" Every question came with a blow when he refused to answer. Sometimes they spoke about God, telling him he was a traitor to his own people. Sometimes they laughed, calling him slave of foreigners. But mostly they enjoyed the silence after his screams. At night, when the camp quieted, Hamid would close his eyes and think of his home in Kandahar. He remembered his mother's hands, rough from work, but always gentle on his face. He remembered the smell of cardamom tea, his father's voice telling him that bravery was not about fighting, but about standing firm when fear tries to break you. He repeated those words every night like a prayer. One evening, he heard footsteps near his cell. A boy, maybe 15, came in with a bowl of water. "You are soldier?" the boy whispered. Hamid nodded. "My brother died fighting with Taliban," the boy said, eyes down. "They say he is martyr. But my mother cries every night." Hamid didn't know what to say. He just placed a weak hand on the boy's shoulder. In that brief silence, they were both victims of the same war. The boy began bringing him extra bread at night. Small acts of kindness that kept Hamid alive. But kindness was dangerous here. A week later, the boy stopped coming. When Hamid asked a guard about him, the man smiled. "He talked too much," he said, and walked away. Days turned into weeks. The prisoners were moved deeper into the mountains, away from any rescue chance. Sometimes Hamid could hear drones in the sky, faint and distant, like ghosts of a world he once belonged to. He imagined his fellow soldiers searching for him. But deep down he knew, after this long, they must have given up. The Taliban commander, Mullah Firoz, began to visit him more often. "You are brave," he said once, sitting across from him. "You don't speak. You don't beg. But tell me, soldier, what did you fight for? For money? For foreigners? Or for a country that forgot you?" Hamid stayed silent, though inside him something cracked. He wasn't sure anymore. He had joined the army believing he could protect his people from chaos. But now, in this prison, surrounded by men who believed they were doing the same, he began to see the tragedy of both sides. Everyone thought they were right. Everyone thought God was with them. One night, a prisoner tried to escape. The guards caught him at dawn. They beat him in front of everyone and left his body hanging by the gate for 2 days. The message was clear: there was no way out. That night, Hamid couldn't sleep. He looked at the stars through a small hole in the roof and whispered, "If this is the end, let it mean something." He began to write with a small stone on the wall, short sentences, fragments of memory, his father's name, his unit number, a few lines from the national anthem. He didn't know why. Maybe so someone would one day find it and remember that he existed. Winter came early. The mountain winds grew cruel. Many prisoners fell sick. Some never woke up. The guards dragged bodies out every morning like sacks of grain. Hamid felt his strength fading too. His vision blurred. His hands trembled. But his spirit somehow refused to break. One morning, Mullah Firoz returned. "You look ready to die," he said calmly. Hamid smiled weakly. Maybe, but I'm not afraid. The commander tilted his head. Why not? Because I already did, the day you took me from my brothers. Faraz said nothing. For a brief moment, there was something human in his eyes. Regret, maybe even respect. But then he turned and left. That night, the guards came again. They tied Hamid's hands and blindfolded him. He didn't resist. The cold air cut through his lungs as they led him outside. He heard the sound of the wind, the creak of boots, the faint murmur of men praying. When they stopped, someone whispered a verse. Then silence. A single gunshot echoed through the valley. The mountains stayed quiet, holding his last breath in their shadows. Weeks later, villagers found his body half buried near a dry stream. In his pocket, they found a folded piece of paper, words scratched with charcoal. If I die, tell my mother I did not hate. I just wanted peace. They buried him on a hill overlooking the same valley where he had once fought. No flag, no ceremony, just a small pile of stones and the whisper of wind moving through them like a prayer. And in that silence, Afghanistan kept breathing, torn between hope and heartbreak, like it always had.